diving here. Yeah? There's lots of things you can do in the swimming pool. I know when I used to take my children, obviously you can do front crawl, back crawl, you can do a somersault, I can do a handstand in the water, you know, you can do all sorts of things. But what you can't do, what I think nobody in this room can say they've done, is walked across the swimming pool or walked across the sea. I'm pretty confident that they will have done that. But that is what's happened in our Bible story today. Who was it that walked across the water in our Bible reading? Who was it? Who was it that actually walked on water? Jesus was walking on water, but who else? Peter. Yeah, well, good. Peter. Now, the account we've just heard this morning that Di read happened just after Jesus had fed over 5,000 people with just 5 loaves and 2 fish. I think that's quite significant. That's a really big, famous account that a lot of people will know about. That just happened at this point. But after the miracle, rather than hanging about and lapping up the fame or gaining more power, Jesus actually dismissed the crowd and sent the disciples in a boat onto the lake. And then he retreated to a place all by himself. It seems that Jesus was alone, praying through the night, as he was recorded doing quite often throughout the Bible on other occasions. Jesus takes himself off regularly to talk to his Father. Meanwhile, it seems that the disciples were trying to get across the lake, struggling against the wind. They were a long distance from the land, they were quite far away from the shore, and so that means quite far away from Jesus at the time, when the storm was brewing. Trouble was surrounding them. It was night time. Darkness was all around them. Bear in mind, they'd just witnessed that miracle, the feeding of the 5,000, and not many hours later, there they were in a storm. I wonder how they felt at that point. Did they feel fear straight away? Did they pray? Or were they calm? Maybe they felt a bit disappointed. After seeing Jesus perform such an amazing miracle, they were back to facing difficulties again. Shouldn't life be much easier now? They were back to reality. It seemed that they were very much focused on the storm, and maybe didn't even call out to Jesus in that moment. In these dark hours before morning, when all might have felt hopeless, Jesus approached them walking on the water. And their first reaction was fear. They were terrified, and in that moment they didn't even recognise Jesus. That's amazing, considering they've been walking with him and learning from him physically over however long before this. But they didn't recognise him. They didn't know it was him, and they thought he was a ghost. As they called out in fear, Jesus responded immediately. And once they knew who it was and remembered he was with them, their fear faded away. Once they recognised Jesus' voice, once they knew it was him. And what did he say? He said, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." The Message version of the Bible says he was quick to comfort them. And it would have been a great comfort for them in that moment. After battling against the wind, being scared by a figure walking towards them, I'm sure his words were a great relief. In verse 28, Peter asks Jesus to call him out to walk on the water. Now at first glance, this might seem a bit of a strange thing to ask. My first thought might be, what on earth got into him? What made him say that? Where did that idea come from? Is Peter just trying to get in on the act? Trying to show the power? Trying to show the attention? Is it just a hasty knee-jerk reaction, an impulsive moment, a childish act of enthusiasm? I'll do it. Or was it a genuine act of faith? Peter says to Jesus, "If it is you, call me. If it's you, Jesus, I'll do it." Here, Peter is checking it was okay with Jesus, that it was Jesus' will for him. And when he gets the okay, he does it. He steps out onto the water and walks towards Jesus. And yes, it might appear that that step of faith failed. But we're looking at it as glass half full. He took steps on the water, and he walked along the water. Something that I hope he would never forget, something that showed him and others witnessing it, that Jesus was more than human. He is the Son of God. And with God, anything is possible, even walking across water. But my thoughts go to the fact that he took a huge risk. Imagine if he stepped out of the boat and just sunk straight away like I did. It would have been very embarrassing, I think. It wouldn't look good. Surely he would be laughed at. And then it would cast doubt on who Jesus was. If he'd just stayed in the boat, he could continue to follow Jesus without question. But Peter takes a huge risk, stepping out onto the water, following Jesus. I wanted to focus on that first and foremost. It wasn't a failure, because he took the steps and experienced the power of trusting Jesus, while the other disciples sat in the boat, taking no risk at all. Peter takes a step and walks in faith. I think too often I'm like the disciples in the boat, staying safe, not wanting to risk embarrassment or failure. Sometimes I'm afraid to step out in faith, in fact many times. I might have some head knowledge of what the Bible's saying, I might know what faith should look like, but I don't always put that into action because of fear, because it is a risk. Real faith is costly and should take us out of our comfort zone, which is something I'm not so good at. Afraid to pray a bold prayer, especially with some witnesses. Because if the answer from God isn't clear and immediate, I'm worried that it will do more damage than good, cast more doubt in an unbeliever's mind, pose more questions that I can't really answer simply. It can feel safer to keep my faith to myself. This is where Peter is different. In that moment, he puts his faith into action, trusts completely in that moment. But let's not completely ignore the sinking part. This part, I think, is crucial for us to remember. The part where doubt seemed to creep in, where fear replaced his focus. The part where, even though he just experienced an amazing experience and confirmation that this man, Jesus, was something special, doubt still crept in. As Peter focuses back on the wind, the danger around him, literally taking his eyes off Jesus and focusing on his situation, he began to revert back to his human ability and limitations. He began to sink. Instantly forgetting what he needed to do, what he'd just been doing. But not totally forgetting though, because he did actually cry out for help. He remembered to speak to Jesus, and Jesus helped. He reached out and took hold of Peter. Notice from the passage, we see Jesus does point out that Peter has little faith and questions why he doubted, but Jesus still catches him. Then as fear fades again, so does the storm. Their whole focus has shifted back to Jesus. This passage highlights our human limitations, how prone we are to the distractions of life. However, it also highlights God's love and grace to help us when we fall. Peter needs to realise that he did lack faith and that he did doubt, but importantly, he has experienced the difference between having faith and then losing it, and that Jesus was still there when he failed. And he is with us too. Notice that when he took his eyes off Jesus, things changed. We know that was not the end of his story though. Jesus was still with him, and the plan for his life still rolled on. The plan that God had for his life. It's a lesson. Part of Peter's journey from being a fisherman to a true follower of Jesus and a fisher of men. With God we can go through many storms, but we are reminded in Isaiah, he will be with us in our troubles. He rescues us. He will not let the rivers or fire consume us. Our troubles can't overwhelm us when we focus on and include Jesus. And we are reminded through this passage in Matthew, in the storms of our lives, remember Jesus. Fix our eyes on him, and he will bring us through. A few years ago, I read a testimony from someone called Charles Colston, known as Chuck, who was the chief counsel to President Nixon. He was involved in some serious scandal, which actually led to him being imprisoned. So he had to serve some time in prison. But despite this, something amazing came out of it. He found a ministry called Prison Fellowship, with a mission to show Christ's love to prisoners by coming alongside them and supporting them. In his book, Loving God, he said this: "As I sat on the platform, waiting my turn at the pulpit, my mind began to drift back in time to scholarships and honours. Cases argued and won. Great decisions made from lofty government offices. My life had been the great American dream fulfilled. But all at once I realised that it was not my success God had used to enable me to help those in the prison, or hundreds of others like it. My life of success was not what made this morning so glorious. All my achievements meant nothing in God's economy. No, the real legacy of my life was my biggest failure. That I was an ex-convict. My greatest humiliation, being sent to prison, was the beginning of God's greatest use of my life. He chose the one thing in which I could not glory for his glory." Confronted with this staggering truth, I discovered in those few moments in the prison chapel that my world was turned upside down. I understood with a jolt that I'd been looking at life backwards. But now I can see. Only when I lost everything that I thought made Chuck Colston a great guy had I found the true self God intended me to be and the true purpose of my life. It is not what we do that matters, but what a sovereign God chooses to do through us. God doesn't want our success, he wants us. He doesn't demand our achievements, he demands our obedience. The kingdom of God is a kingdom of paradox, where through the ugly defeat of a cross, a holy God is utterly glorified. Victory comes through defeat, healing through brokenness, finding self through losing self. Now the reason I'm sharing that is because of the thing I've taken from this reading in Matthew. 3 words stood out to me. 2 of those words were fear and doubt. Fear, failure, sin, difficulties, personal worries and fears, the state of our communities, the struggles of so many of our young people, the greed in our world, and so on. All these things are storms of life where doubt can creep in. All of these things often cloud our lives and contribute to loss of faith, especially when we don't admit our mistakes, or we blame others, or just spend time complaining. We don't believe or if we don't believe that we and others are even forgiven. We focus on the ifs and buts. We stay in the boat, afraid of failing. We focus on the busyness of life and the comforts, taking our eyes off Jesus. Peter was walking on the water, utterly amazing, but he does sink. Needing help again, he is reminded to rely on God. And so, here, I'm reminded that God is still in control and has a plan for our lives and for this world, a plan that is unimaginable to us. God works through us in times and circumstances we would never expect him to. Which brings us to my third standout word, which was faith. True faith can take away our fears, or at least put them into perspective. When we think we are failing or circumstances seem impossible, God is still at work. Hold on to that. Hear Jesus' words over your situation, over whatever storm is around you. Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Now I want to give us a few moments to to think of storms in our lives, things that worry us, things that are making us feel anxious, then imagine looking away from it and fixing your eyes on Jesus. So we'll give you a few moments to do that.